Mhm.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Soulthentic Podcast. Today, I'm so excited. I have not one, but I have two special guests today. I have Alaine Duncan and Tracey Post joining me, and I'm going to share a little bit about them before we jump into the interview. So, Alaine Duncan is a SEP, a licensed acupuncturist, an amazing being, both of them are. And Alaine integrates both neurobiology of traumatic stress with the wisdom of Chinese medicine. She's author of The Tao of Trauma, and we're going to dive all about that today. And I'm so excited to have both of you on. Tracey Post is a licensed social worker. She's the CEO of Princeton Center for Mindbody Healing. With over 20 years of experience, Tracey specializes in traumatic experiencing and multisensory trauma treatment and so many other things. So let's dive into it today. Without further ado, thank you both for joining me. I'm so honored to have both of you on.
Great to be here.
Really excited. Thanks for the invite.
Yes. So, my first question to both of you, there's a new class, a new cohort of Tao of Trauma. We're going to dive into what Tao of Trauma is, but both of you are combining your forces and creating sort of a blend of Tao of Trauma and mental health. And it's sort of this bridge that you both are creating. And so we're going to really focus on that today. But first, I want to ask you, for those who are not familiar with Tao of Trauma or even trauma therapy, what could you share from both of your perspectives of what it is and how you're bridging both of those worlds?
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll start with just a little history.
Yeah.
I I really wanted to see. I was inspired to learn more about trauma healing back in about 2003, when the war was young and soldiers were coming home and committing suicide, unable to live with what they'd seen and what they'd been asked to do. And I felt very moved to. I felt very moved about that for their parents, for them, for the communities. And so I sought out the Somatic Experiencing Institute to bring trauma training to the Silver Spring, Maryland area. And they were the only organization at that time who trained both mental health providers and acupuncturists and body workers in how to work with trauma physiology. And my first day in training, they explained that there was a sympathetic and a parasympathetic nervous system. And I said, oh my, that sounds a lot like yin and yang. I'm an acupuncturist. And then we went through the steps of the self-protective response, the 5 steps of the self-protective response that neuroscientist Peter Levine described by going into nature and looking at predator-prey relationships. And I said, oh my goodness, those 5 steps are actually mirrored in the 5 elements of Chinese medicine. There's an important integration that can happen here. And it turns out that by bringing together the Western neurobiology that I learned in the somatic experiencing training with my training as an acupuncturist, we could more further refine how a person is suffering or struggling with their experience of too much, too fast, too soon, without adequate support, which is my definition of trauma. We could not just see their dysregulation and being fidgety or being anxious or being flat and being unavailable, or all the ways that trauma shows up. We could actually see 5 different survivor types. And by virtue of the sages of Chinese medicine from 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, we could know a lot about where to find that trauma that's actually in the tissues, not only in the mind. It affects the mind, but we're going to find the resolution of it, the resolution of the brace or the collapse that's resulting from this overwhelming experience of danger or life threat. We can find it more readily if we use this integrated lens of Chinese medicine with Western neurobiology. And that's what the Tao of Trauma is essentially.
That's incredible. Yeah. And how about you, Tracey?
Yeah, I mean, I think I come to it legitimately, the work of trauma, because I am the product of unprocessed generational and familial trauma.
Yeah.
I'm my mom's first generation here in the States. And so I kind of grew up thinking something's not quite right. And obviously, that's what made me become a social worker. Because we know that like 90% of mental health folks come to this work because we're working through our own. But I came by the way of theater, and I think theater saved me because it was a way of embodying things that I wasn't able to understand in my mind yet, but could work through the lens of my tissues at that time, even though I didn't know that's what I was doing.
Wow.
And from that, I went into the work of sex therapy specifically as a sex therapist, because I didn't want to deal with people's problems. Ha 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 ha. Because that was supposed to be easy. And there is, a lot of people were not listening to what I was telling them. Can you imagine? And so I thought, what's happening? And at the same time, I was doing work in the child welfare system, training folks who had been working with kids who've had the experience of too much, too soon, too fast from birth or before birth. And they brought in Peter Levine to train us trainers. And I said, here it is. Here's what's happening.
Yeah.
And it helped me with myself and my family and my clients. And so I knew that I wanted to do his training. And through that, I got the opportunity to meet and be mentored by Alaine, and her integration with the Tao of Trauma was really like, so now I not only work with the body, but I can be intentional about understanding where someone got stuck or thwarted in those one of those stages, and intervene in specific way. I mean, I said from the beginning of my career, like, we heal in relationship, and we need touch to survive. And when that harm was done before, or when touch was supposed to be our first teacher, words don't touch it, can't touch it. And so we need that. And so this work has really transformed not only my practice, but my life.
Yeah.
But my field right now, mental health, people are very anxious about touch. There's a lot, we're kind of turning a corner into being more conservative, and that pendulum and that cycle that we go through. And so I wanted to tweak things so it felt safe enough for mental health providers to enter into this without feeling like, well, I'm just going to have to do touch. I can't do touch. Right.
Yeah.
So that's how this entwining, I guess, with Alaine has happened. And it's just been such a gift.
Yeah.
It's incredible, both. And I just want to thank you for both of the work that you are bringing out into the world. It's incredible. It's so needed right now. And the thing that keeps ringing my head, and something that often, Alaine, you say in the trainings, is this is vibrational medicine.
That's right.
And that the experiences, the difficult experiences, the trauma that is held in the body and tissues also needs to be held and supported by a vibrational medicine, by something that's so much beyond just the mental, the rehearsing. Tell me more about that, because I feel like we talk about that a lot in the Tao of Trauma. And just to give people background, I've taken the Tao of Trauma year-long course with Alaine, and as an acupuncturist, it's like blown my mind in so many ways. And I think it showed me what's possible with bridging both of these worlds, because we need to find a bridge. We need to, like what you say in Alaine, like find a way we can be together so we can walk together.
That's
So
right.
tell me more about like the vibrational piece, like, and especially Tracey, I'm curious about coming from that traditional more therapy perspective, feeling maybe there was something missing, there's a missing piece. And then when you got into the more vibrational piece, what changed? I'm curious, both of your perspectives on that.
Yeah.
You want to start?
Sure. I think because I had the opportunity to come to some of my healing through theater, that touch or interactions in a more embodied way were very, very comfortable. And so I remember early in my career working with a couple of folks and thinking, ooh, I'm just going to do this thing where I'm going to ask somebody to touch my hand, because I just had this impulse and I didn't know this language then, that they were in a freeze state. And from a small thing like having this interaction with someone and having them touch my hand, what they had been struggling with for years with other therapists and me for a year was resolved. And I was like,
There's something here.
Wow.
Something is here. I want to find what this something is. But it was also really scary as early in my career. I was like, I'm going to get in trouble.
Of course, yeah.
So that there was my freeze. And then working with so many children in child welfare through the lens of the worker, it just really helped me realize how that early developmental trauma needs touch. I also had a kid who was born very ill and so couldn't be touched for the first 3 months. And she's great now. She's actually in the other room, kind of excited about listening to this. But that lack of touch at that most crucial time, even though it was, for good reasons, and she still had family who was there, it led to a lot of physical and mental consequences that I learned through the years really required more touch in order to heal.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky to work with a group of people who are very much wanting to understand this, even though they're a little hesitant about it. And I think that being intentional in our work as therapists means, and I'm going to quote Alaine as well, that we ethically have an obligation to use touch as a healing method if the harm has been done so early that the brain is not going to be able to process it. And I think, I hope that our profession is coming to slowly, reluctantly see that there's the truth there.
Yeah.
I hope that answers it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I come to it, of course, through the lens of Chinese medicine. So I understand trauma is essentially a disturbance of qi, right? And
Yeah.
and qi is a vibration. Qi is a waveform that moves through life and influences the movement of the seasons of the year. Like winter has a different vibrational quality than summer has, and there are different tasks and different lessons and different gifts of each of those seasons, and they're each a vibrational gift. And the Taoists told us that if we live in harmony and in sync with the nature of the seasons, that we'll find the greatest health. So if qi moves between yin and yang, then qi moves between sympathetic and parasympathetic, and qi moves through these 5 phases in the agricultural calendar, and those 5 phases also reflect the 5 steps of self-protection. So those are all in the nature of vibration, and either the vibration is moving or it's stalled. And when qi can't move, when vibration can't move, there's illness.
Right.
And or maybe when it's moving in a discordant way, there's illness. And when qi is fully present, when we experience an overwhelming circumstance, we tend to leave our tissues. We can't tolerate living inside our bodies because,
Right.
gosh, who would want to? So the more that we can help people re-inhabit their tissues, then they bring their qi back to their tissues, and then the qi helps them warm, protect, transform, protect, all of those things that qi does. So our main task is to help qi return to the tissues.
Yes.
And then our inner physician can take over and do the healing. We don't do the healing. Our inner physician and the energy body takes over and takes care of us. And it's pretty magical to watch, actually.
It
And
is.
it's so needed now, right? Because we're all in such a vibrational either freeze or overwhelm. We can look at this country or we can look at the world and see this global out of sync vibration that this work can really shift. I believe.
I mean, I think that's what Tracey's just speaking to is probably the thing that calls me the most. That when I look at, when you look at, for example, adverse childhood experiences research and the impact of early developmental trauma, and then you look at who fills our public health clinics, what are the causes of inflammatory illness that fill our clinics, from everything from diabetes to obesity to autoimmune illness to migraine headaches to irritable bowel to all these things. All these things have their root in the neurophysiology of traumatic stress. And they also are the root of really contracted psychological states that tend to not trust each other, make it very challenging to, as you say, walk towards each other so that eventually we can walk with each other. And I think trauma is the root of the social polarization that is so harmful in our culture today. It's it allows racism, sexism, homophobia, all those things, Islamophobia, all those things to manipulate us.
Yeah.
By the 1% of people who have all the wealth but want more. And if for us to be able to think strategically and powerfully and in sync with other people, we have to resolve what holds us separate.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Until the body is calm enough to be able to do that, our thinking brain's offline. And so we are in our own, right? That 1% is trying to, even though it seems unimaginable, hold on to their sense of safety and security. So if we can find that layer, meet each other, we can walk forward.
You know, what's interesting about, what I've learned in the Tao of Trauma is that we have animal-like instincts. We're going to do what's needed to protect ourselves.
Right.
We know with what we have capacity for.
That's right.
And so this work has what showed me as a practitioner to say, each person is where they are, and can we meet them with these tools with where they are? And that's okay. That's totally okay. But, allowing them to have a safe space and just to hold them so so their capacity can grow just a little bit more, so they can handle, when someone cuts them off on the road. Okay, hold on. This is not a threat.
Right.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I can come back, and it's okay. And so that it's been just profound. I think this work, and what I'm also hearing from both of you is that you're introducing a paradigm shift in medicine that needs to happen on both the trauma therapy, psychotherapy side, and also on just in general, like allopathic medicine, being able to integrate more of these Eastern principles, the Eastern wisdom that tells us like, hey, when we look at nature, it gives us the answers, and it doesn't take forcing or killing all the bacteria. It takes actually let's listen and let's hold space for. What's coming up in both of you as I'm speaking and reflecting back?
A bunch of stuff, actually.
Let's go.
Western medicine tends to think of the body as a machine with discrete systems. So the cardiologist takes care of your heart, and the endocrinologist takes care of your hormones, and you get my point. Whereas Chinese medicine looks at a person as a whole being with all the parts influencing and working together with each other. Western medicine also tends to come out of, and I don't mean this as a exclusive description, but it tends towards being a dominator model of healthcare delivery. I'm going to come in, I'm going to poke you with a needle, I'm going to lift up your shirt, I'm going to manipulate your limbs, and I'm not going to ask permission, or I'm not going to, ask you what you want out of your time with me, or what you're looking for. And we're really trying to shift that paradigm out of a dominator model and into a collaborator model, one that invites the vibrations of nature, the vibrations of wellness, into the body to take over.
And luckily, I think I always like to be on the optimistic side. Like, we have research now, which is so important to a lot of Western facing or living folks, especially physicians, right? Between the ACEs study, the First Childhood Experiences study that Alaine referred to, and Stephen Porges's work of the polyvagal theory that says, hey, here is where it's like, biologically, this stuff starts when an unmyelinated ventral vagus doesn't get what it needs to be able to soothe or to take in that soothing. Then all of these vibrational illnesses start, right? Yeah. And we here in Western culture, we differentiate mental from physical, but again, that's another distinction that makes zero sense, right? They're all interconnected. Yeah. They're so interconnected. Yeah.
I really like using polyvagal theory to analyze the social and political constructs. What he says is that the sympathetic nervous system are essentially our fight or flight, our mobilization response. It's on all the time. It's always available to help us protect and defend. And we can be really grateful for that. But it has no social intelligence. It needs a break in order to have social intelligence, and in order for us to not just be angry and pissed off and want to punch people's lights out all the time. So, and that there are two breaks on sympathetic arousal. One is the fire break, or the ventral vagus nerve, that allows us to break our arousal through relationship. Like, I don't want to throw sand in your face or bite you because you're my friend, not because I'm going to get thwacked. And then the second break is the freeze response. Like, I'm going to break my arousal because my heart can't stand beating in this strong anymore. I'm going to have a heart attack, so I'm going to collapse instead. Well, the most important one of those is the ventral vagus, is the fire break, that we can thwart our antisocial impulses because we can look in someone's eyes and see a human being there. We can let them in traffic. I bet they're in a rush. Maybe they're getting ready to deliver a baby. I don't want to push them out of the room. There are ways that we can embrace people's needs through our heart, instead of being competitive and want to smash them and mistrust them and be afraid of immigrants, or be afraid of racial minorities, or be afraid of sexual minorities, or all of that.
Yeah, what I love about that is, like, we're all human beings, and we all are social beings. We thrive in. I mean, I know this from just being a part of an Eastern culture that is very communal, very collectivist. It's like, when you go to Vietnam, you have your aunties down the street, and it takes a village to really feel that sense of connection, support, and I think in the West, it oftentimes feels very isolating, where you don't, there's this taboo around talking about your things, your emotions, and all, the things you've gone through. But I feel like that is changing with, more people being comfortable in seeking out these therapies, understanding that it is vibrational, and it's okay to want touch and to want a friend to talk to, or want to be in a sense of community where you are heard and seen, and all the things. And I love that those principles are embedded within Tao of Trauma.
That's right.
And it's really beautiful. And I think, to kind of go along with the cultural paradigm shift, I want to ask you both, how can Tao of Trauma benefit medical doctors, mental health providers, practitioners, acupuncturists, body workers? From both of your perspectives, how can this work help to expand that? I know that with this next Tao of Trauma course, it's expanding to more mental health providers. I know, being a part of the most recent cohorts, seeing the interdisciplinary spaces that are created as we're talking about Tao of Trauma, as we're talking about the East and the West, it provides so much richness to medicine in a different way.
Well, here's how I like to think about it. So people who experience this, early developmental trauma that Tracey's been talking about, the dysregulation started very early on. And that dysregulation often leads to high levels of inflammatory illness. Things like, and we could even call it complex multi-symptom illness. So we've got people with Crohn's disease, and also with autoimmune illness, and also with migraine headaches, and also with sleep problems, and also with higher rates of cancer, and all kinds of things. And in Western medicine, you'll see a discrete provider for each one of those different manifestations of the dysregulation. But in Tao of Trauma, we're working on the regulation. We're not working on the symptom. We're working on what gives rise to the symptom. So I think a Western medical provider can often be frustrated by people with all these multiple different symptoms, and their inability to resolve, as soon as you resolve one, or maybe bring it down a little bit, then something else pops up, because the focus needs to be on regulation, not on symptoms. And Western medicine is so, dedicated to resolving symptoms. We need Western medicine. I have Western medicine providers. I believe in surgery. I believe in medications, all of that. But I also believe in the inner physician and the necessity to look for regulation and support the creation of regulation.
Yes. I think another piece of the beauty of that question and what the Tao offers is this cross-cultural, professional integration, right? Because the folks who are in the room taking this in are taking it in in their tissues, in their bodies, in so many levels, right? And that web of caring, of network, then goes out into the world. right? And each interaction, what is it? That then the person who walks in is going out and they're a little bit more regulated and they're taking that home to their sleeping partner or their kids, right? Like we have this amazing force field of healing energy that's, coming to, I think, hopefully a tipping point, right,
Yeah.
Lynn? I think we're hopefully coming to a tipping point, and that even in the traditional Western medical schools, they're looking at narrative medicine now. There's much more of a push, even though there's that resistance on the other hand to go, oh, people's stories are important, and all the research says, well, 80% of the healing isn't about the specific mental health technique. It's about the connection between the two people. Oh, again, it's like, oh, now there's research, so that makes but hey, like, we need that because in our capitalist culture and our society that says it's got to have a book, what do you call it, a footnote at the bottom of it. We now have that.
Yeah. It just reminds me of that this is vibrational medicine, and when you start working on that level, it vibrates out not only to you but your family,
Right.
to your environment, to your community, and it's create this, again, a wave, a shift, a vibration outwards. And I think what's really powerful is that once, like, as a practitioner going through Tao of Trauma, I felt like going through the different elements. So each it's a year long, and so you go through each of the elements, really going in depth into each one, and you feel the progression. I mean, me and you were talking, Tracey, about you both this last weekend finished the fire.
Yeah.
And just seeing the change and the shifting in vibration, even in a group like that. Tell me about what you both have seen in terms of your reflection of how it shifts even the practitioners and the way they will practice. I mean, it's definitely, I can see so much on that, but I'm curious, both of you.
It's kind of magical, actually, to watch how people go through the year. Maybe I could just name the 5 steps that we explore.
Yes.
So awaken arousal belongs to the metal element and the fall, and it's that capacity to respond to the twig that snaps in the forest or the creek in the stairs. That where our arousal first gets called into. Let me pay attention here. Then the second step is signal threat. That belongs to the water element, and in particular the kidney and the bladder, so that the adrenal gland, sits right on top of the kidney, and when it's kind of held tight and high, it pushes against the diaphragm, secretes adrenaline, tells the amygdala to be afraid, and we're constant. And that's why someone whose adrenal gland is poked up like that constantly feels afraid, like can't find the difference between discomfort and fear, can't find safety as well as threat. Just everything is danger. So that's the winter time. And it makes sense because winter is a very harsh season. Do I have enough crop stored away? Do I have enough wood in the bin? Am I going to make it through this really harsh season? Then we come up to spring, which is the mobilization response. That's mirrors the sympathetic nervous system. When the wood is flexible, it can distinguish the level of mobilization that's required. Like, do I need a fly swatter? Do I need a sledgehammer? Can I mount a mobilization response that's commensurate with the level of threat that I'm experiencing? Or am I going to go over the top and hurt somebody? So we want a flexible mobilization response. We want a flexible signaling response. So we're not constantly signaling even when it isn't danger. So then we go to the mobilization response. And then we come up to the fire, which has 2 jobs. One is to command the whole kingdom of the body to respond. When there's danger, the heart sends out this message that says, now, every fire truck, get out there. We got to work. The kingdom is at risk, And it also, when it receives the message of completion, when it knows that the kingdom is safe, it sends out a message of equilibrium. So it restores coherence. It knows when the threat is over and that it can come back to ease and peace. Sometimes that's hard to know when the threat has been very big. And then the last step belongs to the earth. That step, I call it digest the gristle. No matter how successful we've been through going through all those previous steps, there's always a little bit of gristle. There's always a little bit of something tough that we lived through, but also to harvest the lessons. It's the stomach and the spleen. The stomach breaks things down. The spleen transforms and distributes. And we want to harvest lessons that expand our life instead of contract our life. And we want to help our patients have more expanded lives instead of more contracted lives. So we go through those 5 steps, not only working to repair contraction or collapse that's in our past, but also to build capacity in each one of those elements so that we meet our future with more on board. And watching that more on board come alive in a classroom of people, it's just quite magical to watch them expand in their own. So there's kind of a duality, like mostly we're all clinicians and we're all working to become better clinicians, but along the way, we grow too.
Yes.
And we bring our own vibration into the treatment room, and the more regulated our own vibration is, the more effective we can be, more helpful we can be to our patients.
Yeah. So it's really cool, as we were talking about earlier, Lynn, because those 5 stages also mirror, right, as the Taoists say, the world, the seasons, but organizations as well. And watching the group go from like the beginning metal and like, oh, I don't, am I letting go of something that I have to let go of my own thinking I'm really good at something, and can I do that? And then, oh, am I really going to be able to? And the fear in the water. And then when we hit wood, it was like, there's a certain level of frustration. You were kind of talking about that earlier, right? Like, I don't know if this is going to really work, right? And then this time, halfway through, it's like, and the energetic shift in the room is palpable. Everyone feels it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it is magical.
I mean, I can say for myself, the group starts to create a resonance field of this feeling, and it is palpable and it's powerful, and it's also entwined with the principles of Tao of Trauma, which includes consent and slowing down. Like, when I start to almost step in, it feels like now when I practice it as a practitioner, when I'm incorporating the Tao of Trauma tools in my treatment room, in my space, I'm stepping into that resonant field of slowing down even 2 to 3 times, slowing down how fast I talk, how much, and I'm aware of the distance I am with my patient. I'm aware of, okay, let's just sit with that. Let's take a moment just to give you space with that. I mean, those things have been radically changing for my path as a practitioner. I graduated and I was primarily went to a TCM school where it was like put in the needles and you let them sit there for 20, 40 minutes, whatever it is. And then you come out, take the noodles out. It was very touch and go and just like very, disconnected from the whole person, what the person needs, until I came to this work in 5 elements, which was, let's look at what the whole person needs. What's the regulation that this person really needs right now? What element, what self-protective response are they at? And so this work really gives more color to all of those things, which has been so powerful. I'm curious, and I'm curious both for you, how you've integrated it, and maybe even a story you can share in how this work has shifted for you, or even another example of how a practitioner can apply Tao of Trauma into their practice and the shifts that they experienced. I'm really curious to know, stories from both of you, if you could share or anything comes up.
The one that's coming to me, I spent a dozen years working in military medicine. I helped start the integrative medicine program at the DC Veterans Administration Hospital, and that was really some of the richest clinical experiences of my life. This one time I went to the office to pick up a new client, and a pretty big man. I'm pretty small. And I reached out my hand to shake his hand, and he said, "I don't press flesh with women." I said, "Oh boy." And so so what's your name? He told me, I told him mine. So when we walked down the hall, and he's telling me all about his headache that's along here, and how he's got pain down the side of his body and down his leg. And he's practically drawing the gallbladder meridian that belongs to the wood element. And the wood is also associated with the sympathetic nervous system and with anger. and also with the tendons and ligaments. So we get to the door of my room, and there are some flowers on the desk, and I can see his eyes kind of looking at the flowers. And I said, "Oh, I see you're looking at the flowers." He says, "Yeah, I used to garden with my grandfather." I said, "Oh, great. Let's bring your grandfather here with us, and so okay, so he sits down, and tell me about your granddad. And he tells me what he did with his granddad. And I said, you know, I think I'm noticing your eyes getting a little softer. And he said, well, maybe. and and I said, I wonder, how did I say it? Something like, is there any part of you that feels safe right now? And he looked at me with these huge eyes and said, damn, no one has ever invited me to feel safe. And I thought, of course, you can't feel safe when you're in battle. It's not safe to feel safe. You
Right.
can't let your vigilance down. So I hope he didn't feel safe. I want him home alive, right? But he, we just had a moment there. No more conversation. He got up on the table. I did a very simple treatment, source points on his liver and gallbladder, treated his wound, and he got off the table and put his knee over his ankle over his knee to tie his shoes, and he went, I haven't been able to do that since I got home from Iraq, because his tendons and ligaments had been held so braced and tight that his knee couldn't move. But that moment of experiencing a little bit of safety and having a little bit of acupuncture that sent a vibration through those meridians allowed some flexibility in his system. And I always ask people for one word at the end of the session so that they can kind of encapsulate their experience. And I asked him for his word, and he said, ebullient. I said, ebullient, okay. And we walked back up to the desk and to say goodbye, and he picked me up and planted a kiss on my cheek and set me down. And later the reception said, what did you do with that man in that room? But it was one of the most wonderful experiences of my life, just to give him that. And in some ways it was a small thing. He could bend his knee and tie his shoes, but it was more than that. He had found flexibility in his inner reality that had been so rigid and so tight and so oppositional. Like, we were not walking towards each other when we first met each other, but at the end, we were completely walking with each other.
What a gift.
What a gift to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For both of you.
Yeah.
That was some vibrational.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That was a vibration.
I mean, that.
Mm-hmm.
And my brain is like so many. I think two things come to mind. I supervise quite a few clinical or provisional social workers and counselors. And I'm also a got to get it done type person. But I would say one of the hugest gifts of this work is slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
And slowing down in my supervisions with my staff so that they can feel what slowing down offers, because we are so attuned in our culture to go, get it done, and wanting to do more and put one more thing in the session. And so that slowing down and harvesting what has happened has been transformational, I think, for my staff in their work with other people. Now it's like, well, we got to get one more thing in. They're like, nope, I'm going to end even 5 minutes earlier and spend that extra time just really harvesting what's happened here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think specifically about someone I've worked with for a while who was paralyzed due to an operation because they had a stiff person syndrome. And not fully, like a piece of bone got lodged in at L4, I think. So they can walk, but it takes a lot of effort. They have to think, breathe, and it's just and they have had a constant pain since this surgery, probably even before, but certainly since the surgery, and legs that can't feel anything. And so we've done a lot of intention work, and he had a really high startle response that we worked with a lot. But recently there was a lot more spasming happening. And so I said, well, what would you think about touch? And I'm thinking in my head, he can't even feel it, but I'm just suspending my disbelief here because I think, and he's like, well, I don't know, because he'd always been reluctant, and he's like, yeah, all right, all right. And so we did, and I went down on the floor because he couldn't get on the table, and I held this one leg that he feels nothing in, what causes the most pain. And he was bringing intention, and I had my hands in intention, and his face he's like, oh my God, I'm not feeling any pain for the first time in 3 years. Are you touching me? Like, yeah. I don't feel it, but I feel this. I feel movement. I feel flow out my foot. I feel warmth.
Wow.
It was just
Incredible.
so
It's pretty magical.
vibrations, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it didn't matter
Mm-hmm.
that technically his body couldn't feel it. The energetic movement.
Yeah, I love both of those. Thank you both for sharing. I mean, it just reminds me of this principle of less is more. We actually don't need to.
More.
Mm-hmm.
If we're doing acupuncture, for example, and we're putting 20 needles and we're sending 20 different signals in the body versus just if we're just doing, a secondary occipital or secondary diaphragm hold and we're holding somebody's wrist and that helps to move some sensation down their arm. Sometimes that's enough. And just what we're saying here is that these Tao of trauma principles and these with trauma therapy and has been so radically shifting in terms of paradigm in medicine in many, many different ways.
Right. If trauma is too much, too soon, too fast, then how can we not to repair too much, too soon, too fast, pause and slow down? And as you said, I got to do a shout out to my mom who passed in 2019, but she would always say to me growing up, Tracey, less is more. And I was like, lady, you full of it. More is more, right? She afforded me the opportunity to take the SE training and then find Alaine. And I just, every time I think, yeah, mama,
Nice.
less is more.
One of the characteristics of people who experienced early developmental trauma is a sense of urgency and kind of a fast inner reality. And so that every time we ask them to, and we ask ourselves, because a lot of us can be described in the same way, to slow down that too much too fast without adequate support. If we chunk it down and we slow it down and we provide adequate support, we've actually done our job. And helping people slow down can, that pause can be just revolutionary.
And that reminds
me for a moment, what would happen if nations paused before reacting and responding? Think for a moment what it would be like, what it would be different in the Middle East or in Europe or in parts of Congo and Sudan. And if nations paused long enough to collect themselves and communicate with each other. If we have our ventral vagus nerve on board, we can create diplomatic solutions to conflict instead of using our national sympathetic nervous system, which essentially is an unbraked military
to club each
intervention. Yeah. So let's cultivate ventral vagus in community, family by community, by nation, by let's do that.
Yes.
Let's do it.
So you're saying something, Tracey?
I don't know what I was saying. I was saying,
well, I have a question that's coming to mind for both of you. And I think both of you are touching onto this, Tracey with your mother and Alaine with the story, is you come back to resource, like helping people resource, I think is such a powerful thing. I think something that I noticed or a theme that came up for even clinicians and practitioners was like, it was hard for people to find a resource in themselves. And to me, it's like, we've all sort of have our own things. We've been in, let's say, difficult relationships or, coupled relationships where it doesn't feel, we didn't have a resource. And so to me, what I'm hearing is if people were to be able to have that inventory or their pocket full of those times of what my mother said, or, that time where I felt just so supported by my community, we would have a much different world or place or even medicine. I'm curious what both of you understand about resourcing and how important that is to practicing this medicine, practicing trauma therapy.
Yeah, I think I think resources are really important. Coming from my background, I think that a lot of times clinicians will think resources are just the quieting. Oh, do some breathing. Oh, I went on a, Elaine's example, silent retreat for one day. 12 days will be even better, right? But really, we have this opportunity to use resources to help people if they're going to much yang, am I saying it right? So that they can turn the corner to find that inner physician. But sometimes we have to kind of gently poke the bear so that we're coming up before we crash too much into immobilization. I think sometimes in my field, at least, there's a fear of the activation and there's a desire to tamp that down, to brace against that. So I think there's this balance.
Yes.
And I think building a toolbox of resources is so critical. And sometimes we can't even do that. Especially we can't. It's more challenging to do that with our body when the body has been the place we felt unsafe. So cultivating that kit of nature, spirit, my chair is
The sun
so
on your skin.
profoundly important. Yeah.
I'm going to reflect on that question by going back to the 5-element model. The different ones of us, based on our survivor type, based on our constitution, are going to be feel resourced by different experiences we've had in our past or different experiences that are offered to us. So if we're a metal type, we're longing for an experience of respect. So if we can remember a time when we felt respected and what that felt like, that's going to be a resource state. If we're a water type where there's a lot of fear, we're going to feel resourced by an experience of having been protected somewhere. I got bullied at school, and when I went home, my grandma was there and she protected me, and she went out in the playground and told that kid to stop. Or if we're a wood type, we're going to feel resourced by an experience of having been encouraged. You can do it. You can do it. Go ahead. I got your back. Like we want smooth flow. We want to go forward in life. If we're a fire type, we're going to feel resourced by an experience of love, by remembering a time when we felt loved or we loved someone. And if we're an earth type, we're going to feel resourced by an experience of having been supported. I used to ask people, like I did in that fellow that I told the story about a time they felt safe. And then I realized that so often when you invite someone to feel safe, all they do is remember the times they felt unsafe. So then I started thinking about these 5 resource states, and I started asking people a time they felt protected. And even a person who's lives in a lot of habituated state of threat probably has at least one experience when they felt protected. And if they can go back there and experience that moment again, it will help them go forward in their life. Same with all the other 4.
Yeah, that's powerful. And it just, again, such wonderful tools that are embedded in the Tao of Trauma work and course and principles and the things that you learn by being in that field of learning about this.
Are you there, Alaine?
So I just
I'm here. I think Lynn is frozen.
Oh, there, I'm back. Yes.
Okay, good.
It still records even though I'm frozen. So yeah, don't worry about it. Oh.
Yeah, you're frozen again.
Wow. I guess it's still recording. So is there anything we want to talk about?
Yes.
That we want recorded or not? Lynn's great. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to thank both of you for just coming on and sharing so much of your wisdom, little droplets of what we're going to learn, what you would learn while being in the Tao of Trauma course. Can you hear me? No, not too much.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Well, a little bit.
You're going in and out.
Okay. Here, I'm going to make a shift to something really quick.
So not hearing
find the time to finish.
Okay. Huh? Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yes.
Yep.
So I turned
we
off.
We don't see you.
And so we're in low data mode. It's still going to record everything, my video, audio, everything. But we're just, you guys just can't see me or each other.
Okay, that's fine.
So I want to thank both of you for coming on and sharing your wisdom and so much little droplets of gems of wisdom from Tao of Trauma, from trauma therapy, from both of your experiences. I want to ask you a few quick questions before we come to a close today. which is if you can go back and give advice to yourselves earlier in your career, knowing what you know now, what would you say?
Hmm. Well, that's an easy question.
Go for it, Tracey.
No, it's not. I would say trust yourself. Trust the
Beautiful.
path. Trust the journey.
Yeah.
Find like-hearted people to walk the journey with. Yeah.
Well, I would definitely say something similar, like slow down,
Mm.
trust that things are unfolding in the way that they're supposed to. And I guess I'd also say let your vision be broad enough.
Mm.
Don't be solely focused on, your income or solving this particular specialization. Let your interest be as broad as it can be, and let your vision be as broad as it can be, and then trust what you know being a clinician, a lot of it is one-on-one kind of work, and it's hard to see the impact of the vibrations that you're creating. So
Yeah.
trust the vibration, and trust that what you're doing is making a difference.
Love that. Trust the vibration.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to ask you
Impressive.
both, two more questions, which is this Tao of Trauma training that's starting in September of this year. What can people expect? What can, anybody that's listening to this who is a practitioner, is an acupuncturist, is a mental health provider, what can they expect?
I think you can expect
being
to
a
have
part
your
of this?
eyes opened, your heart opened. You can expect to
Yes.
have your heart opened and your eyes opened, and you can expect to cultivate really meaningful relationships, maybe with yourself first, and also with other clinicians. And you can expect your world to open up.
Yeah.
Amazing. And where
Yeah, I
can they
think
learn more
that's it perfectly, I think.
about the Tao of Trauma?
Well,
About
both
this
of our
next training?
websites, especially Integrated Healing Works, has all of the information on the
Okay.
2 cohorts that will be running for 2025, 2026. One that'll be in Maryland in Silver Spring, and the other one that will be in Hamilton, which is right near Princeton, New Jersey. And
Amazing.
So
yeah,
we meet for five 2-day workshops throughout the course of the year, one in each season of the year, and each season, of course, reflects a step in the self-protective response. So we go through the self-protective response as it manifests in nature and as it manifests in ourselves,
Yeah.
and explore some ways to access where a thwarted experience in that particular step shows up in the body, and how we can help it unwind, find tone, find healing, whatever it needs.
Find vibration.
Find
Move.
vibration, regulate the vibration.
Yes, move through the
Yeah.
vibration.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you both so much. I have one last question that I ask every person that comes onto the podcast is what does it mean to be your authentic self? And it could be anything.
I once had a therapist I was working with ask me to what were 2 words that described me, my essential self, and
Uh-huh.
pretty quickly I came. I'm a revolutionary healer,
Yes.
and that seemed to fit.
Totally.
Mhm.
I would say so.
Thank you, Lynn.
And Tracey?
I think that for me it would be a loving journeyer. I want to be a loving journeyer with the people that I come in contact with, for as long or as short as that journey might be.
It's
Wow.
beautiful.
I love that so
Really,
much.
really beautiful.
Incredible. Well, thank you both so much for coming on and sharing any last words, things, burning gems of wisdom that want to come through before we come to a close.
I guess my favorite statement is all healing rests on embodied experiences of kinship.
Yes.
So look for a relationship in people who you think you're not related to, and see if you can find it.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. I will link the training, the Tao of Trauma training, and the website of Alaine and Tracey in the show notes below. And we will tune in with you in the next episode. Thank you both for coming on and sharing yourselves and your wisdom.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
Thank you so much.